I, 56 male, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer back when I was 37. They caught it relatively early, but I wasn't expected to survive about a month after my diagnosis. My ex-wife, Sarah, 55, divorced me and took the kids' house, and most of our savings. She even turned the kids at the time, a male teen, a female tween, and a younger female tween against me. And I was alone. I was an only child, and my parents died in my 20s, so no other family to deal with my seemingly inevitable death, well, except for one person. My co-worker Jane. She was the only person who seemed to care about me before you ask. There was no infidelity. Sarah divorced me because she couldn't be my nurse as she watched me die anyway. The doctors wanted to try to remove the tumour after a few courses of chemo, and I went into remission after the surgery, and some more chemo. I tried to be there for my kids. But Sarah remarried, and her new husband took my spot after a while. I stopped calling on birthdays and holidays, giving gifts, and trying to be involved in their lives. It hurt almost as much as the cancer when I realised I didn't mean anything to them. I ended up marrying Jane, and we have 2 kids. It still hurts, but I love my new family, and they care about me anyways. Sarah recently got diagnosed with terminal heart disease, and they're struggling financially. My kids called me for the first time in over a decade to ask me out for lunch. I didn't want to go, but Jane said they're extending an olive branch to hear what they want to say at lunch. They didn't even bother with pleasantries. They immediately asked me to help out with their mom and medical bills. I said no and got up to leave, but my son said that even if I didn't love their mom, they did. And if I loved them, I needed to help. I asked them what their half-siblings' names were when the last time they called, who they spent the previous 2 decades worth of Father's Days, with why I should care about a woman who took everything and left me alone while facing my death, or about the kids who wouldn't even see me before my surgery or at any point when I was dying. They were silent, so I said, I don't care about your mom. Nor do I give a single crap if she dies, and I don't care how bad her dying hurts you guys, because I care about you all as much as you care about me. Not in the slightest. I won't help, because I don't love her, or you guys. And left, I've been getting calls from my ex-family telling me how awful I am for saying that to my flesh and blood. I wouldn't care, but my wife told me that I was too harsh on them, even though I was right. Am I the idiot? Edit, her husband works, but their health insurance and his P-checks can't cover the costs. I didn't give up after Sarah remarried about a year after I went into remission. I tried for 11 years, but all I'd get on the calls was a thank you and 1 new answers about what's going on in their lives as time went on. The calls got shorter and shorter. If they answered at all, I stopped calling after 11 years because not one of them answered on Christmas. I tried spending time with them in person over the years, but it was always short because the kids were busy. Or at least, that's what I was told. I fought for my kids until the youngest was 22 when I signed the divorce papers. I gave my ex full custody in exchange for her not taking everything in our accounts. After the remission, I voluntarily paid child support, but didn't seek custody because all 3 of them wanted to live with their mom at the time. I thought the kids were scared of me dying, and that's why they didn't want to see me. I didn't want to believe she turned them against me for a long time. And by the time I realized it, it seemed to me like forcing them to live with me would just push them even further away. I think Sarah told them I was having an affair, but I don't know. Oh boy, it would be some serious karma if her husband divorced her. Opie, you are not the idiot. She didn't want to care for you, and it's outrageous for her to expect it from you. It might not be your children's fault for abandoning you. However, their mother turned them against you, and they probably made the lunch date at her bidding. Besides, you have no reason to help someone who abandoned you in your most vulnerable time. The children could have tried to reach out, but only chose to when they needed something. He owes them nothing by any chance. Was she having an affair with this guy when you guys were still married 1 year? Seems too soon to get married. Maybe that's why she poisoned their mind against. You guilty minds work in twisted ways. Absolutely agree with the above. She's guilty at this point. It's irrelevant. What turned the children, the youngest, is 30. They're not kids anymore, but adults who could have re-examined what happened with you with adult eyes. They just didn't. For well over 10 years, and they didn't pretend to want to. Now, which was hurtfully helpful. They just wanted your money and would say what they needed to manipulate you. You did the right thing by going. You also did the right thing by saying no. I'm sorry, but I don't think these relationships are fixable. The damage is done my 29 male girlfriend Sandra, 29. And I have been dating for a while now. She invited me to have dinner with her parents, and I said yes before I could arrive. Though she asked me whether I'd like any vegetarian options, I told her that I prefer non-vegetarian stuff. She agreed to inform her parents about it. She later texted me to confirm that there would also be non-vegetarian options. This was a week before the date of the dinner I arrived at the house, and she told me the food would be vegan. She said a friend of her father's along with his son would be arriving that day from somewhere else. It was a surprise visit. They asked whether they could come, and my girlfriend's family said yes as they're vegetarian. They decided to change the cuisine. I was very much annoyed at that, but I kept my silence. The discussion was mostly turned towards them, and they also barely seemed to recognize I was there while they all had fun at the end of the dinner. Though her father actually said we have to discuss something in private together, so perhaps you can leave our house now. I got fed up and told them, "Oh sure, you asked me what I'd like to have push that out of the last moment, and then hardly pay any attention to me before essentially asking me to screw off at the end. I'm disappointed in all of you. You guys are terrible hosts that resulted in a massive argument while Sandra accused me of not being accommodating, that I'm a child, and that I should have been grateful. I was even invited, etc. I left. But I wonder whether I did anything wrong. Am I the idiot? You are the idiot. You acted like a sulky toddler because you had to endure one vegan meal. And in the end, you threw an epic tantrum if you felt offended or disappointed at their hosting. You still should have kept your mouth shut and your feelings to yourself, and maybe talk to Sandra about it later. Your behavior towards them was actually worse than their transgressions. I don't know if you cared if they liked you or gave a good impression, but you certainly did not. Maybe you can recover it a bit if you apologize, but most likely you've just cemented yourself in their minds as a hugely entitled, unappreciative, condescending, rude. I go with everyone's the idiot here. What a weird dinner party. Easing vegan food for one night is not the end of the world. I usually find 1 or 2 soy-free allergy dishes to eat. I certainly wouldn't pout about it. Your girlfriend's father was rude when he asked you to leave. However, I wouldn't throw a tantrum. I'd leave and decline any further invitations if it was an unpleasant evening. I disagree. The girlfriend specifically asked him what he'd like. Then they completely changed the menu the day of with no warning. The entire evening, Opie was ignored by everyone, despite him being a guest as well. The father basically said, "You get out now. We need to discuss things privately." No, I agree 100% that they are terrible hosts. If Opie had been told all these things in advance, he likely wouldn't have minded, but they didn't. You're not the idiot. However, you have very likely just bombed your relationship with your girlfriend. I owe my brother around $300. He fronted me some money for a family vacation and said I could pay him back in a 3-paycheck month. My husband and I hosting a small dinner with the family members and my brother's family arrived on Monday to stay through the weekend. His 2 kids, toddler and young grammar schooler, are generally well behaved. But they're still kids. So I told him to keep out of the bonus room currently half finished, and my craft room, you all know where this is going. So I'll just cut to the chase. I came home yesterday to find the kids, SP, out on the living room floor, surrounded by art supplies in ruined condition. They were finger painting with my gosh and had completely cross-contaminated the colours drawn on my good watercolour paper with Copic markers, completely crushing the tips, and ruined, dirtied several items that my friend had bought me from Korea. I confronted my brother, who was casually watching TV, and he told me that he didn't let the kids go into the craft room. He'd gone in himself and grabbed them just a couple of things to entertain themselves with. He agreed to buy me replacements until I studied tallying up the cost. Then backtracked and said the price was BS and started insisting that most of the stuff was still in usable condition. I said, fine. You don't have to replace anything, but you can forget about vacation money. He snapped at me not to argue in front of the kid. I said, whose arguing sounds like the conversation is over now. He wants me to pay the vacation money immediately and work out the replacement of the art supplies afterward. I feel like he's just going to try to haggle me, or is going to replace my stuff with Crayola and call it, even not, the idiot debt is debt. That is why a ledger shows both credits and debits. You and your brother have a ledger of transactions between you. He gave you $300, so you were at $300. It's totally justified to now use the art supply debt that he owes you to calculate your debt. Figure out what needs to be replaced, replace it. Take a photo of the receipts and takes it to your brother if it comes out to $325. Tell him he owes you $25 if it comes out to $275. Send him the $25. You are the idiot. You can't just decide to cancel a separate debt, especially since there hasn't been an agreement on what's owed. Honestly, the whole thing is so petty. Though it's a few replaceable art supplies your NE News and nieces were interested in instead of making a thing about it. You could have chalked it up to being a present from their uncle and took the time to show them the proper way to use them. Those few replaceable art supplies are going to cost hundreds of dollars to replace up. You're right that if you were to pay him the money in full, he'd try and replace your supplies with substandard quality crap none. Artists never understand how appallingly expensive good quality artist materials are. It isn't your fault that he didn't know that and just gave his kids your supplies without your permission, so he didn't have to entertain his own kids. My sister has an 18-year-old daughter. Casey, it was just the two of them for 10 years. Casey never knew her dad, which means my sister had sole custody of Casey when she was little. Casey used to talk a lot about how there were these mean girls in school. One of them, Valerie, Casey disliked more than the others. She was the worst. My sister did her fair share of complaining about the dad too. Especially when she had to replace an eraser a couple of weeks into school because Valerie broke it when Casey was 9. My sister and Valerie's dad started spend time together, and then they got married a year later. There was a lot of shock on my part, seeing as my sister knew how Casey felt about Valerie and given her complaints about Valerie's dad allowing her to get away with so much. But he's an attractive guy, and I guess that won out over everything else. The announcement to Casey went about as well as can be expected. She was furious at her mom, more so on her wedding day, because my sister wanted the girls to match and look like sisters. For the first time, Valerie used the wedding to taunt some of Casey's friends, saying she would replace them with her. It only added fuel to an already bright fire. Casey ultimately refused to participate in the wedding on the day and sat with me. Things in their household were tense. For years afterward, my sister would get upset that Casey was so mad that she didn't change her opinion of Valerie, and would vehemently deny that they were sisters. About 2 years after she married my sister, decided they all needed family therapy. It was only in the last 2 years that Valerie appears to have grown. And from the outside, it doesn't look like she's the bully she once was. But Casey still cares nothing for her. Both girls graduated in May, and Casey moved out, and in with me, wanting to get away from Valerie the other day. My sister and I met up for lunch, and she was venting about Casey not talking to Valerie at all, and how Valerie had wanted them to meet up every day after classes. Started, they go to different colleges, but both are local. But Casey didn't even answer her. She said she thought after all these years would see Valerie as a true sister, and even if she didn't like her, there would be some sense of family loyalty there. I was shocked to hear my sister say that she noticed and asked why I looked like a fish. I told her I'd never expected it be so naive to think Casey would feel that way when she hated Valerie long before my sister met her husband. My sister's attitude changed very fast, and she told me that I'm the naive little brother to think these things don't change when family bonds are created. I told her that family bonds aren't created that easy when there's already bad blood present, no matter how much she might want them to be there. She told me I owed her an apology and she'll be waiting for it. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot your sister chose her partner over her daughter, bringing her bully into her home and trying to force them to play nice. Her daughter will never forgive. Forget or get over that well done for supporting your niece me banging Valerie's dad should have automatically transformed my daughter into someone who doesn't hate being bullied your sister, the delusional idiot. Absolutely. Her mother, who was supposed to give her support and safety, brought a nasty bully into her home. Opie's sister should think herself lucky if Kay speaks to her. Let alone Valerie, someone is owed an apology. But it's not your sister. Her ideas of how family bonds are formed come solely from watching Hallmark movies. I-31 female love romance. I love reading about two individuals falling in love in the idea of eternal love. My husband, 27, recently started having an issue with my romance items. He says they are in the way I keep my books on one bookshelf. I have my own iPad, though I prefer physical books. I have my own library card and account. I do half of the chores, pay half of the bills, and do my part around the house. The romance books are not affecting his life in any way, but he hates them. He commented on throwing them out and having a fresh start. So I bought a small cabinet and dresser with a lock on it from Amazon and locked up all of my novels. My husband tried opening the door of one and found out it was locked. Now he's upset and guilt-tripping me, saying that I don't trust him and care more about my romance novels than him. Am I the idiot edit? He comments that they're useless and in the way, and he shoved the bookcase a few times. It's flimsy, so it does sway every time he does that. I even moved it further into the corner, but he complained we did have to move into a studio apartment for his dream job, so it's less space than he's used to. But the bookshelf is relatively small and out of the way, so you downsized into an apartment for his dream job. But you can't keep the things that make you happy. He sounds immature and selfish. You are not the idiot. It feels like he's threatened by the romance novel. Somehow, which is odd, he should consider some internal reflection as to why reading romance novels bothers him so deeply. H, they move for his dream job, and he's trying to throw out all her belongings when he's mad. He physically shoves the BC-8 with her stuff so hard it sways alarm. Bells are ringing for me right now. This may be the beginning of some dangerously controlling behaviour he's been hiding from you thus far, so just be aware of that. Have your guard up for further manipulative guilt, tripping or pushy behaviours. Oh, it sounds like he's taking out his frustration of having to downsize on your books. They're a physical thing. He sees can point to and blame. Maybe his dream job isn't all. It was cracked up to be. Tell him to grow up and use his words instead of picking fights.